When a man disguises himself as a secret agent to save the woman he loves, he becomes a target of the authorities in South Korea because he is a key witness to past events. In the end, the two of them work together to catch the perpetrator who killed their parents. To find out how the story unfolds, let's dive straight into the film's plot. Jung-go is a very handsome man who works as a secret agent. With the extraordinary skills he possesses, he is able to perform dangerous jobs for clients with a very fantastic pay. In addition to using advanced tools that support the mission, Jung-go also has a genius partner in the field of hacking named Mrs. Minju. Even though the two have never met and have only been connected through a smartphone call, Jung-go never asked about the identity of clients and targets. He just needs to complete the mission and get the money after. With the offer of a very high payment, Jung-go was assigned by the company leadership to meet a client named Sung-kul and retrieve a suitcase he was carrying. It turns out there are other parties who want the suitcase, so he has to fight with the guards from the SS security agency. In the end, Jung-go was able to handle the situation quite easily and bring the target to a very safe place. Meanwhile, Young-sin is a beautiful reporter who is very ambitious in seeking news among celebrities. Unfortunately, no matter how hard she tries, she is still looked down upon by her boss because the scandals Young-sin covers seem uninteresting. Since childhood, Young-sin was adopted by a man named Mr. Tsisu after he lost his biological parents and lived for years in an orphanage. Young-sin's adoptive father works as a lawyer and owns a cafe. One day, Young-sin hears information about a mysterious and skilled man known as the Healer, who works as a secret agent. Feeling the need to learn more about the Healer, Young-sin is convinced that this task will pique the curiosity of netizens. Young-sin even actually intended to contact a healer just to hire them as a news source. For a long time, Young-sin had also idolized a famous reporter named Munho, who was known for actively speaking out against social injustices. At that time, Munho was investigating a mass dismissal case that was very detrimental to the employees. It was also Munho who hired the SS bodyguard to seize the suitcase targeted by Munsik, but Munho's efforts were in vain because the suitcase is now in the hands of Munsik and his secretary, Mr. O. Seeing the unmatched abilities of the Healer, Munho intends to use the Healer's services to find a girl who disappeared 20 years ago. The girl is known as G.N., Munho's niece, who was actually reported to have died. Munho is convinced that Ji-en is still alive, so he wants to find out without telling Ji-en's mother Myung-gi. Myung-gi herself has now become a frail woman who has been in a wheelchair for several years. It turns out that a few years ago she was involved in an accident. Only a photo reminds her of her past when she did illegal radio broadcasts with her 4 friends and her husband, who has now passed away. The man who is now Myung-gi's new husband is named Munsik, who is also a friend from her teenage years. According to the traits Munho, Mrs. Minju believes the girl she is looking for points to Young-sin. The next day, as Mrs. Minju instructed, the Healer followed wherever Young-sin went, in a hurry to leave for the office. The two met on public transportation when Young-sin fell into Jung-go's arms because the bus braked suddenly. Jung-go tried to support Young-sin's body, which was about to fall backward as the bus was about to move, but he covered his face to hide his identity. Unlike other targets, according to Jung-go, Young-sin was quite difficult to handle. Moreover, the girl seemed wary of him. Jung-go's attempt to take a strand of Young-sin's hair was unsuccessful, so he followed the girl off the bus. He planned to snatch Young-sin's bag to get a comb or another item that could be used for a DNA test. Jung-go threw a can at a passing cyclist, causing him to lose balance and crash into Young-sin. Jung-go took advantage of the panic to grab Young-sin's bag that was lying on the ground. Jung-go didn't find anything that could be used for a DNA test. Meanwhile, Young-sin, noticing her bag is missing, quickly follows Jung-go. Young-sin managed to catch the man rummaging through his bag an alleyway entrance. Yo-sin then praised Jung-go while waiting for the police to arrive. Surprisingly, Jung-go managed to open the door and restrain Young-sin as she attempted to escape. Young-sin made every effort, but he remained powerless when in Jung-go's embrace. Amidst that fear, Young-sin was unaware that his nails were being clipped by Jung-go to be handed over to Munho. After waiting for 1 week, the lab results came out with a very matching DNA result. This success led to Jung-go being given a second mission. Investigating Young-sin's background was suitable, so Kung-go approved the mission. It is known that Young-sin was adopted as a young child by Mr. Tsisu, his adoptive dad. Young-sin's adoptive mother has passed away, so Young-sin only lives with Mr. Tsisu. In addition to running a cafe, Mr. Tsisu worked as a lawyer, with his office located inside the cafe. He is known as a generous lawyer who cares about his former clients. Even some former inmates who were helped were given jobs by Two-Hand Tsisu. It's no wonder childhood Young-sin has been friends with the inmates. Meanwhile, Young-sin visits the apartment of an actor she has been targeting. The actor is suspected of being involved in a scandal. Upon arriving at the apartment parking lot, Young-sin saw a woman being assaulted inside a car. He wanted to reprimand, but was stopped by the guards standing outside the car. Young-sin's focus was broken when the actor he was waiting for was about to enter the building. She decided to follow the actor. The woman who was abused earlier also entered the same apartment. The woman's name is Young-sin. During the live session, Young-sin bravely began communicating. Young-sin remained silent, and she got off as soon as they reached the 9th floor, where the actor's apartment was located. On the other hand, so Jung-go could follow Young-sin, he placed a tracking device on the girl. Upon arriving on the 9th floor, Young-sin asked about Young-sin, a woman left behind in the elevator. Without hesitation, he took the elevator to the top floor with Jung-go. Fursat Young-sin was apparently correct that the actress intended to commit suicide by jumping off the building. He tried to stop the woman from jumping. After convinced, the woman complied and Young-sin grabbed her hand to quickly descend. Without them realizing, Jung-go secretly recorded the event to show it to Munho. While watching the recording, Munho couldn't hold back his tears. He could feel the bitterness Young-sin felt all this time. Munho is satisfied with Jung-go's work, so Jung-go is given a new mission, which is to find out Young-sin's dream. Jung-go took advantage of the opportunity. When Young-sin was at the cafe downstairs, he sneaked into Young-sin's room upstairs. He intended to look for Young-sin's diary, considering Young-sin was not active on social media. Fortunately, Jung-go wasn't caught as Young-sin entered the room, hiding on the roof. In the middle of the mission, Jung-go received news from Mrs. Minja that he was being sought by the police. Jung-go is suspected to be behind Sung-chul's murder, as he was the last person seen with him. The police found evidence in Sung-chul's pocket, a paper with the healer's email, also known as Jung-go.
사이버 범죄 수사.
Due to the incident, Mrs. Minja asked Jung-go to stop working and hide for a while. Jung-go refused because it went against the client's wishes, who wanted him to find out about Young-sin's dreams. Jung-go then decided to stay by Young-sin's side after discovering that there was a photo of him in Young-sin's room. Jung-go was curious about where the woman got his photo from.
곤란한데.
뭐가?
이 여자 앞에 좀 더 있어야.
Jung-go installed a bugging device to listen in on conversations at Young-sin's house, including at the cafe and Mr. Jisu's office. This allowed him to watch Young-sin without having to keep watch around the clock. Jung-go wants to know if there's a link between this mission and Sung-chul's death. Jung-go felt trapped by a person not just smart, but also capable of moving quickly. Because the perpetrator knew Jung-go's email address and the hotel where Jung-go and Sung-chul stayed after the incident in the subway. The cyber police are eager to start the investigation considering they have been targeting Jung-go for years. They are convinced that Jung-go is a henchman willing to do anything, including becoming a hitman. Proven by the autopsy results of Sung-chul, which showed that the man died due to toxic chemicals that caused respiratory problems. Therefore, it can be confirmed that the injuries found on Sung-chul's body occurred after his death. It turns out that the water Sung-chul drank contained a synthetic poison that, even if ingested in small amounts, would cause the lungs to become paralyzed, leading to death within hours.
꼴랑과 신경마비가 사인이랍니다.
Meanwhile, Jung-go suspects that the perpetrator might be the person who hired his services. He then tried to recall the last conversation with Sung-chul, where the man mentioned a news company that had become a famous news company in South Korea. It could be concluded that Jung-go's client came from that company. Jung-go ignored Mrs. Minja's warning to hide because he didn't want to sit idly by before catching the real killer.
사람 죽이는데 독을 왜 쓰나? 귀찮게.
On the other hand, all this time, Mun-ho had been haunted by guilt over the disappearance of Myung-hee's child, who was none other than Mun-sik's wife. Thanks to Jung-go's help, Mun-ho was able to find the child, who has now grown up as Young-sin. Mun-ho just stopped his car in front of Young-sin cafe. And coincidentally, the girl was tidying up outside, so Mun-ho could see her up close. When Young-sin approached him, Mun-ho rose from that place. Mun-ho, not knowing, was watched by Jung-go, who monitored Young-sin. Jung-go is still unsure of Mun-ho's face, so he asks Mrs. Minja for help with the man's identity. They then discovered that Mun-ho was the younger brother of the heir to the gel news company.
이건 또 뭐냐?
뭐가?
Knowing that Mun-ho is connected to the company, Jung-go immediately follows him. He managed to keep up with Mun-ho's car, even though he was running and leaping across rooftops and residential houses. Worried about not making it in time, he borrowed a motorcycle from a colleague and followed Mun-ho to his house. After successfully sneaking into a room, Jung-go found a photo of Mun-sik and his friends from when they were young, which proved that he and Mun-sik were connected to each other.
재밌어지려 그런다.
Meanwhile, Young-hee doesn't want to go home because the man who abused her is watching her. Sympathetic, Mr. Chizu will take Young-hee in at his house for now to share a room with Young-sin. Young-hee asked Mr. Chizu for help to take on her case, as she is a victim of an agency leader who sells young artists to officials and authorities. The agency leader uses deceitful methods, such as drugging and blackmailing the artists with their scandalous videos. Young-hee has reported it to the police, but her case has never been investigated due to lack of evidence. Fortunately, Young-hee was still allowed to live as Mr. Wichin loved her, and Mr. Wichin is a rising candidate for mayor of Seoul. For Young-hee's case to come to light, Mr. Chizu asked Young-sin to report on it. Young-sin felt doubtful about it because the company where he worked was a small media outlet. Seeing Young-hee's determination, Young-sin's spirit ignited and he wanted to help her.
순간 설렘.
However, Mun-ho always broadcasts honest and reliable news. He never followed the given script, so Mun-ho often received reprimands from his superiors. Especially the news delivered by Mun-ho often corners large companies that collaborate with his news company. Repeated mistakes repeatedly made by Mun-ho could get him fired from his job. However, the company didn't dare to make that decision, as Mun-ho is Mun-sik's brother. From the beginning, Mun-ho was indeed asked by Mun-sik to work at his company. Mun-sik will give Mun-ho the freedom to report anything, but Mun-ho refuses because he does not want to follow his brother's words. Mun-ho didn't want his life to be constantly controlled by Mun-sik.
우리 서로 노는 물이 다르잖아. 갑자기 왜 이래? 어?
Without Mun-ho's knowledge, Mun-sik plans to take over the SS Guard Company at a fantastic value. SS Guard will continue to operate as usual, the only change being that ownership will transfer to Munsik. The offer most certainly tempted the CEO of SS Guard, named Sang-soo, especially after learning that the funds promised by Munsik would be transferred the next day.
금액은 22장 제시했었고.
To stay close to Young-sin, Jung-go applied for a job at the company where Young-sin works. He even directly asked to become Young-sin's subordinate.
301년치.
To discover who framed him, Jung-go must disguise himself as Young-sin's junior at the news office. Jung-go will only stay at Young-sin's office for a maximum of 4 days. If he doesn't find anything, he is willing to stop the disguise. Since it was impossible to stop Jung-go, Daeon was instructed by Mrs. Minja to keep an eye on the man, as Daeon was a fellow secret message courier. Jung-go turned off the tracking device, making it hard for Daeon to find Jung-go. The reason Jung-go did it is that he was on his way to meet his biological mother. After the passing of his father, young Jung-go was left by his mother to go abroad. Now she has a new family, but their relationship remains good.
엄마 아들 그놈 몇 학년이지?
Jung-go's purpose in visiting his mother was to ask about the photo he also found in Munsik's room, because one of the people in the photo is Jung-go's father. In other words, Jung-go's dad is an old friend of Munsik and Myung-hee. Jung-go was intrigued by the bond formed between them. Unfortunately, his mother didn't have any information about his father's past, considering it's long since he met Jung-go's father's pals.
잘 모르지. 이게 언제적 일인데.
Upon returning from his mother's house, Jung-go caught Daeong watching. Daeong was actually ordered to spy on Munho and report everything he does to Jung-go. On the other hand, due to a disagreement with his superior, Young-sin drank until he was heavily intoxicated. Jung-go was asked to take Young-sin home. They agreed to handle Young-sin, as the girl wouldn't stop babbling when she was drunk. Jung-go asked to stay the night at Young-sin's house as it was getting late and the subway stopped. On top of that, he had run out of money for a taxi. Mr. Chizu allowed it as long as Jung-go didn't let Young-sin get drunk again, because every time she gets drunk, that girl causes big problems.
술을 마시지 못하게. 그게 좀 힘들죠.
While sleeping on the sofa, Jung-go was startled by Young-sin, who was sleepwalking. In a daze, the girl suddenly took the sofa that Jung-go was sleeping on. Jung-go gently tried to wake Young-sin up, but the girl just held his arm tightly. Jung-go realized that Young-sin must be having a nightmare. The next day, the news agency was shaken by a controversial article written by Young-sin. They even received calls from various parties to clarify the truth of the news article. Young-sin did not expect that the news about Young-hee, which he posted while drunk, would receive such a huge response. Young-sin shared details from Young-hee as detailed, even though he had been warned by his superior not to disclose it to the media. The mistake Young-sin is making could certainly jeopardize the company's future. Realizing he had caused a commotion, Young-sin could hide as his boss looked for him. Meanwhile, the news about Young-hee also caused chaos at other news stations, one of which is Munho's workplace. Munho's superior won't let Munho find out, because that man would insist on broadcasting it despite the impact it would have. Unfortunately, Munho was curious and intended to dig deeper. This became an opportunity for Munho to reject company executives wanting him to join the world of politics. Unexpectedly, Munho visited Young-sin's office to discuss the Young-hee case. Young-sin was asked to deliver the news to Munho. The girl may not protect Young-hee as a source. Munho's request was like a bolt of lightning, which made Young-sin feel like being jolted. For a long time, he has idolized Munho, but only recently found out that the man might have gained fame by stealing news from low-level reporters. Young-sin feels disappointed he's been underestimated. Munho aims to protect Young-sin from the lurking danger. Given Young, he includes state surveillance. Without Munho's knowledge, Mun-sik is searching for Yongsun's whereabouts to teach a lesson.
그 친구를 조사해봐요.
Iskar was ordered to follow Yongsun, who was home after work with Jungo. Realizing he was being followed, Jungo quickened his pace until he reached a corner. Unexpectedly, Sang-soo and his men had surrounded them. Yongsun is asked to join Sang-soo and his friends and show them Yeom-hee's whereabouts. However, he urged Jungo to contact the police.
내가 막을 테니까 넌 무조건 도망쳐.
While trying to distract Sang-soo and his friends, Yongsun was pushed until his head almost hit the wall. Jungo, protecting Yongsun, ended up getting beaten. Because he couldn't bear Jungo, tortured Yongsun agreed to go with them. Meanwhile, Jungo was asked to leave the location by Mrs. Minja as his face was exposed. Jungo refused because he wanted to save Yongsun, who was captured at that time. Jungo then hid his disguise and attacked Sang-soo's gang. He took Yongsun's body to a place so that the girl wouldn't see the violence happening. Moreover, her body was growing weaker due to difficulty breathing. Though outnumbered, Jungo can match the strength of Sang-soo's friends. His movements were very agile, making it difficult for them to land a punch. Feeling familiar with Jungo's appearance, Sang-soo took a picture of the man with his phone. Jungo tried to stop Sang-soo's action by kicking a concrete block. Sound of police sirens scattered Sang-soo and his friends. This also gave Jungo opportunity to help Yongsun by getting medicine to relieve his symptoms of shortness of breath. Before police arrived, Jungo quickly fled because he didn't want to be caught. The situation became more complicated, so Jungo was asked by Mrs. Minja to stop his disguise. The next day, Jungo appeared in front of Yongsun and confessed that the night before he was so scared that he had to run away. He was worried about Yongsun. He decided to sleep outside. Jungo's intentions touched Yongsun, so he was invited to breakfast with Sisu and Yeom-hee. Jungo hadn't experienced a situation like this after his father died, and he left his mother. Jungo was so moved that he even tried to hold back his tears. Meanwhile, as usual, Munho visited Mun-sik's house to keep Yeom-hee company. He mentioned Mi-young-hae's child who had passed away a long time ago. Mi-young-hae refused to discuss her child as she still has not come to terms with her departure. Unexpectedly, Mi-young-hae broke down in sobs and ended up having a seizure due to past trauma. Munho couldn't escape Mun-sik's anger. He led to his wife's illness relapse, especially since the illness hadn't resurfaced for several years. After Mi-young-hae improved a bit, Mun-sik invited Munho to discuss. Daeong secretly reported the surveillance results to Jungo. Munho explained that 2 months ago he was contacted by someone, stating that Princess Mi-young-hae's tomb had to be relocated. From there, Munho discovered the fact that inside the tomb there was only a coffin containing stones. Munho suspects Mun-sik of having faked Princess Mi-young-hae's death. It's possible that Mun-sik was the mastermind behind the death of Gil-han, who was Mi-young-hae's lover and Yongsun's father.
형 아니었어?
Yongsun can only apologize when she is scolded by her superior due to her carelessness. Yonggin's actions even resulted in their company being sued by Mr. Wichin for alleged defamation. Yongsun thought that his career would end here, but unexpectedly, he actually received support from his superior to continue the investigation. He advised Yongsun to work with total dedication in investigating the Mi-young-hae case.
제대로 써먹을 수 있는 뭔가를 캐와.
Excited about it, Yongsun asked Jungo to Mr. Huang's house, who was suspected of being the person who had abused Mi-young-hae. He looked for further evidence and interviewed the man. Unexpectedly, Mr. Huang's house was tightly guarded by many SGAD personnel, which made Yongsun hesitant to enter. With fear and trembling, Yongsun posed a question to Mr. Huang. Mr. Huang's response was completely unexpected. He acted rudely toward Yongsun. Every question from Young-sin is made into something different. In an attempt to intimidate Young-sin, tries to beat the female employee next to him. Quickly, Jung-go protected Young-sin from seeing the violence committed by Mr. Hong. Moreover, Young-sin has shown signs that his body is starting to weaken. Young-in remembers the dark past and often being tortured. Meanwhile, Jung-go secretly contacted Daeon to ask for help. Daeon led friends to make a commotion at Mr. Hwang's house. They threw water shots and plastic bags filled with flour until the situation became uncontrollable. During the commotion, Daeon got into Sang-soo's car and was assisted by Minja to divert attention. The Sang-soo car was made to drive on its own. Realizing that his car had moved, Sang-soo left Mr. Hwang's room. Mr. Hong intimidated Young-sin, whose condition was getting weaker. Young-sin tried to fight back against Mr. Hong. She then showed no fear in facing the man. Jung-go found a way to escape Mr. Hwang's house. He nudged a pot, causing a domino effect, allowing him to persuade Young-sin to escape. Jung-go showed fearlessness in standing up to Mr. Hong. Amid the chaos, Jung-go and Young-sin tried to escape as quickly as possible. Jung-go stopped his car right in front of a cyber police vehicle that happened to be monitoring Sang-soo and his friends. Pretending to be scared, Jung-go explained what they had experienced at Lord Hwang's house. As soon as Sang-soo's men appeared, Jung-go quietly slipped away to search for Da-young's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Daeon drove Sang-soo's car as far as he could. Feeling a bit tense and confused, he made a U-turn toward the port to get away from Sang-soo's pursuit. Thinking he had escaped Sang-soo's chase, Daeon ended up getting caught and was unable to resist. Fortunately, with the help of Mrs. Minja, who tracked down Daeon's location, Jung-go was able to arrive just in time. He immediately attacked Sang-soo so that Daeon could escape. Sang-soo's wrist was handcuffed to the wheel with cuffs that Jung-go stole from cyber police. Jung-go also seized Sang-soo's phone and found a voice recording containing orders from the man's superior. He suspected that the leader was either Munho or Munsik. Moreover, in the recording, there was an order to locate Jung-go and keep an eye on Young-sin. After obtaining information, Jung-go asked Mrs. Minja to track down the identities of the people who were photographed with his late father. One of them, known as Kaibam, who is both a friend of the father and Jung-go's teacher. Jung-go went to the police station for questioning. Jung-go was asked about the article related to Jung-go that he wrote. Unexpectedly, Jung-go received information from the police officer. Jung-go had been sued for defamation by Mr. Hwang, which resulted in Jung-go being placed on the wanted list.
그 황제국 쓰레기.
Jung-go wanted to inform about it, but Mr. Jisoo could not be reached. Reluctantly, he asked Munho for help to quickly release the news about Jung-go so that the public would know the real facts. Accompanied by Mr. Jisoo, Jung-go actually planned to testify as a victim of the abuse committed by Mr. Hwang. He did not expect the situation to become more complicated, where he ended up being made the defendant. Not only Mr. Jisoo, but Young-sin also gets a headache when thinking about Jung-go's case. Young-sin forgot to contact Jung-go, unheard from since the incident at Mr. Hwang's house.
목소리 들었으니까 됐다. 내일 회사는 나올 수 있겠어?
That man always appears when Young-sin is in trouble and manages to make her heart race. Hearing that, Jung-go felt a bit flattered and at the same time curious, as he had never experienced being liked by someone before. Suddenly, Munho paid a visit to Samdae, which is the Young-sin news agency. His arrival shocked and puzzled everyone in the office. The man inquired about the office layout. Feeling confused, Young-sin's supervisor called the owner of Samdae. And the former owner of Samdae said that the building along with the Samdae news agency had been sold to Munho, so the ownership has been transferred to him. Munho bought the building along with the Samdae news agency by selling Sam and other assets he owned. He feels that this decision is indeed very appropriate, because now he has the freedom to report anything. Meanwhile, Jung-go was ordered to investigate the bar that Mr. Hwang and his friends frequently visited. Jung-go pretended to ask for Munho's phone number, but he wanted to hack the data. From there, Jung-go discovered the fact that Munho was the client who asked him to find information about Yongsen. Jung-go is asked to stop his activities as a healer for a while because Mrs. Minja and Kai-bum intend to send Jung-go to Australia. To prevent him from being curious about his father's past, Kai-bum doesn't want Jung-go to delve too deeply and discover the existing facts.
어쩔 거냐고.
Previously, Kai-bum was a reporter who led a rebellion against the government. Kai-bum was arrested and imprisoned for 11 years. He chose to remain silent for his friend's safety. After release, Kai-bum was shocked by the deaths of two of his friends, who were none other than Jung-go's father and Myung-hee's lover. In addition, Myung-hee also became paralyzed and married Munsik, who had become a CEO. It was certainly very suspicious, but Kai-bum had no intention of digging deeper. As expected, Jung-go rejected the government, considering he wanted to find out Munho's true intentions in approaching Yongsen. Besides, Jung-go is not ready to part with the girl.
그 사악한 영감 때문이다.
To get information about the bar that Mr. Hwang visited, Jung-go went directly to the man's house. Jung-go asked Daeom to create chaos like the other day so he could sneak into Lord Hwang's house. Jung-go did everything he could to avoid being caught by the servants and guards on his way to Mr. Hwang's room. When Jung-go finally got in, the man shouted for help, but Jung-go threatened to scratch the painting he had bought at a high price if Mr. Hwang dared to alert his guards. Tuan Hwan tried to attack Juno with a golf club, but he managed to catch the club. With ferocity, Jung-go beat Hwang's stomach and body, bruising him. To avenge the wrongs that man did to Youngsi, as well as other women he manipulated, Lord Hwang repeatedly begged for mercy and was willing to do anything as long as he wasn't harmed. Jung-go would stop as long as Lord Hwang didn't commit violence, especially against women.
전화?
Jung-go also asked about the bar visited by Mr. Hwang and requested the man to show the video recordings of the women used for his business purposes. Jung-go hurried to open the safe as Lord Hwang's guards heard the commotion happening in his room. Fortunately, Jung-go managed to escape before the guards entered. Meanwhile, Yongsin received a message from the healer, Jung-go, to come to the rooftop after following instructions. Yongsin received an envelope containing a hard disk with a video recording file from Mr. Hwang's safe. Yosin apparently knows that Jung-go is still hiding on the rooftop, so she wants to thank him and ask him something. Yongsin is willing to close her eyes so that Jung-go's face won't be revealed.
내가 눈을 가리고 있거든요.
Curious about Yongsin's question, Jung-go revealed himself. Unexpectedly, Yongsin confirms Jung-go's purpose of watching over and saving her all this time. Yongsin is also convinced that if Jung-go cut her nails for a DNA test, then she assumes the man is either her father or possibly her brother. Jung-go neither confirmed nor denied Yongsin's question in any way to keep it a mystery. When Yongsin was about to ask further, Jung-go had already disappeared from his sight. That night, Jung-go sneaked into Munsik's room and warned the man not to contact anyone. Munsik was asked to follow Jung-go's instructions and answer his questions without hiding anything. Munsik denied having framed Jung-go as Sung-chul's murderer. Jung-go also threatened to give the video sent by Sung-chul to a TV station, and it would be watched if Munsik did not expose the killer. Munsik was only given 3 days to consider the matter. As he was leaving Munsik's room, Jung-go was caught by Myung-hee entering. Unexpectedly, Myung-hee stopped Jung-go and mistook him for his old friend, who is Jung-go's father. The chance encounter between Myung-hee and Jung-go left Myung-hee deep in thought. To Myung-hee, Jung-go looked strikingly similar to her old friend Young-suk, who was none other than Jung-go's biological father. Myung-hee wanted to run after Jung-go right then and there, even though Munsik tried to stop her. A few moments later, Myung-hee finally realized that it was impossible for Young-suk to be in her house, since he had died 20 years ago. Myung-hee then asked about Jung-suk's son, who is around the same age as Nganshin and whose real name is Young-sin.
나이가?
지연이보다 딱 한 달 먼저 났잖아.
The next day, Jung-go, still around Munsik's house, felt hesitant. He observed Myung-hee while he contacted Mrs. Minkyu. Jung-go suspected that the reason Minkyu and the teacher sent him abroad was related to his father's relationship with the friends in the photo. Curious, Jung-go intended to ask Myung-hee about it directly.
그럼 내가 직접 가서 물어보지 뭐.
A little while later, teacher Jubu provided some additional details over the phone regarding Myung-hee's identity, which somewhat quelled Juno's curiosity. He drove car to the edge of the lake and remembered his teenage years, when he was punished at school for often getting into fights. At that time, Jung-go could only sit there, hearing the teacher's sympathy and his friend's anger about his father's death and his mother leaving him. Since then, the thing Juno hates the most is people who care and approach him only out of pity. Elsewhere, Young-sin is seen waiting for Munho. Upon arriving at the office, he met Munho, who was about to apply for a job.
김문호 선배 출근했나?
Young-sin then played the recording for Munho from Mr. Hwang and watched as it showed officials who were drunk and flirting with a series of artists managed by Mr. Hwang. Young-sin was actually doubtful whether Munho would really take over his job. Seeing Munho and Young-sin in the meeting room made Juno panic because at the same time, Mrs. Minju was about to send an email to Munho. To change the subject, Juno said that he had located Mr. Hwang's favorite nightclub, but the effort was in vain because Young-sin saw a notification on Munho's computer that there was an email from the healer. Young-sin was surprised because Munho could actually communicate with the healer, while even the detectives were struggling to find him. Beforehand, before leaving, Juno dropped a paper so he could place a bugging device under the table. Young-sin looked at Munho with suspicion. It turned out that Mrs. Minju sent the email under Juno's orders. Juno wanted to know the reason Munho instructed him to watch over and protect Young-sin.
지켜야 하는지 구체적으로다가 데이터를 달라고 요청하라며.
Young-sin seems to have misunderstood Munho's words, as he thought Munho was asking the healer to protect him from gangsters and take a nail sample for DNA testing. Munho argued that he wanted to establish his own broadcasting station, so he needed to know the background of all employees, and all of this was related to the matter of DNA samples.
있었고 여기 썸데이가 그 중에 하나.
Hearing that answer, Young-sin felt disappointed and embarrassed. Juno's face looked slightly relieved because Young-sin had listened to his advice not to trust just anyone. At that time, Young-sin couldn't say much in front of Munho, though Munho was interested in learning about Young-sin's meeting with the healer. Munho then wrote an email to the healer, warning him to be more cautious around Secretary Oh, and also forbade the healer from meeting Young-sin in person. Munho then asked Young-sin and Juno to interview Young-hee and to hand over the evidence to Detective Yom. Apparently, Young-sin knew that the detective she needed to approach was that very one.
감시하던 형사를 하나 압니다. 아마 그쪽이라면 좋아할 것 같은데요, 그 동영.
After being accepted as Munho's assistant, Junsu was introduced to all the team members at Sindinas. He admitted that he had been ordered by Munsik to spy on Munho. During the trip, Young-sin and Juno talked about Munho's performance. All the work Young-sin had been doing apparently left her so exhausted that she fell asleep in the car. When they arrived at the house, Young-sin seemed to recognize a few men who looked like gangsters. Young-sin woke up and left the car. He greeted his father's friends, most of whom were former convicts. They apparently came to the cafe intending to protect Lord Chizu after hearing that the man needed safety protection. In the end, Young-sin was convinced to do the interview, even though Mr. Chizu was worried. If the interview would have a negative impact on Young-sin, Young-sin ignored the negative views, as long as punishing the opposition was possible. At his office, Munsik received information that Yongsin was found at the age of 5 and had moved from one family to another. He was then immediately adopted right away by Lord Chizu. Munsik recalled the moment when his aunt was in the hospital after being in an accident. The woman begged Munsik to find Chian's whereabouts. He reported to the police station that a child had been found hiding behind a trash bin near the scene of the accident. It turned out that at that time, Chian was found to be at the orphanage. I still clearly remember how Chian cried and hugged Munsik, who was cold to her. Elsewhere, Secretary O, observing Munsik's movements, reported to the chairman, who explained the two siblings interested in the child who went missing in 1992. He suspected that Munho had successfully discovered the whereabouts of Chian. The chairman said if Munsik is the greatest student he has ever mentored. Without Munsik's knowledge, he plans to get rid of Chi and for Munsik to live in peace. At his office, Sang so managed to manipulate Munho's voice. At the same time, the fake Munho called Yongsin to go to a place because there was an informant who had been exposed. Yongsin immediately headed to the specified location and turned off his phone as instructed, but it turned out to be a trap. Elsewhere, Munho also received a call from an unknown person. A schoolboy read out a message written by Secretary O. Munho suspected that the message was related to the safety of Yongsin, also known as Chian. The Secretary O is preparing the next plan. He entered a building dressed as a construction worker and damaged a machine. Long story short, Yongsin arrived at the predetermined location. He turned to look for the emergency exit, and carefully, Yongsin entered the building and searched for Munho's whereabouts.
선배, 김문호 선배?
Yongsin found elevator and ran to rooftop of building. At the same time, Secretary O cut one of the cables, causing an electrical short circuit. A panicked Yongsin tried to call for help because the malfunctioning elevator was plummeting uncontrollably. The elevator finally stopped at a certain point, but no one heard it. Meanwhile, Munho asked a healer for help to locate Yongsin because someone was trying to harm her. Fortunately, Mrs. Minju was still able to track Yongsin's whereabouts from the device Juno placed in her bag. Munho and Juno successfully obtained Yongsin's location and immediately headed there. It turned out that Juno arrived first. He then checked all the empty rooms and heard Yongsin screaming for help.
살려주세요! 여기 사람 있어요!
Hearing sound from inside the elevator, Juno sawed a rope on the rooftop to approach Yongsin. He immediately opened the elevator door manually and found Yongsin's body in a limp state. A few moments later, the lift's support cable snapped as Jungo arrived. Jungo took Yongsin from the room. Yongsin didn't get a chance to see the face of the man who saved her because Juno had covered his face with a cap. Juno deliberately didn't say a single word so that Yongsin wouldn't become suspicious. Upon reaching the rooftop, Yongsin, who still had his eyes closed, felt grateful because he was able to escape the brink of death. Yongsin was convinced that the man who saved him was a healer sent by Munho. Seeing Yongsin safe, Juno walked away as if he didn't care if Yongsin would continue to misunderstand his true identity. Because for Juno, he doesn't want to receive praise or feel indebted to anyone. Juno turned around and walked towards Yongsin, then slowly removed the girl's hat and kissed her. Long story short, Munho arrived at the rooftop with a face full of worry. Unconsciously, he called Yongsin by the name Chian, his real name. Yongsin, still stunned by what happened with Juno, didn't notice the call. Munho immediately hugged Yongsin and cried, then asked her to leave the place with him. Behind a wall, Juno observes the two who are about to leave. He instructs Mrs. Minkyu to check the TV and track where Munho is going.
분명히 누가 조작했어.
Inside the car, Munho observes Yongsin, who still looks shocked by checking his pulse. Munho intends to take Youngsin to a safer place because he is worried that Youngsin will become a kidnapping target. Youngsin assures him that he will be fine and can take care of himself. Upon arriving at the apartment, Youngsin asked why Munho called him Chien. Munho explained that it was just a slip of the tongue because he was very panicked. Munho warned Youngsin not to trust the healer, even though the man had helped her.
그럼 알 거 아니야. 밤 심부름꾼이라는 거.
As he entered the elevator, Munho noticed the emergency stairwell door, slightly ajar. Munho was now certain that the healer had been following him. Even though they didn't meet face to face, Munho thanked and asked the healer to provide information if anyone hired them at a high price to harm Youngsin. Since he already knew someone intended to hurt his nephew, Munho then approached Secretary Oh and dragged him to meet Munsik in the office. Munho threatened Munsik not to touch Chien, whom he cherished dearly. Munsik was shocked to hear this, surprised because he didn't know that Chien was indeed still alive. Munho threatened that if Chien ever got hurt, the first person to know about it would be Myung-hee.
그때 명희 누나가 가장 먼저 알게 될 거야.
As Munho walked out, he also ran into Myung-hee. Munho rested his head on his sister-in-law's lap and cried, lamenting the fate of Myung-hee, who was forced to live with a man hiding the truth without knowing where her biological child was. While Munho was still at Munsik's house, Youngsin left the apartment. Before leaving, she also left a message for Munho. When the elevator doors opened, Youngsin paused for a moment. He tried to overcome the trauma, but in the end, Youngsin decided to go down the stairs. That night, Youngsin walked very cautiously, appearing alert as if Jung-go was watching him from the other side. Youngsin then headed to a public phone as he recalled the phone number of the youngest, who was Jung-go. Jung-go listened to Youngsin as she spoke all night, as if pouring out her heart. He looked sad because he could only listen without being able to say anything. Meanwhile, at Jung-go's house, the teacher ate Jung-go's birthday cake. Based on Jaebum's suspicion, Minju looked at the DNA report. She was shocked when she saw the results. Mrs. Minju concluded that the man who was killed by Jung-go's biological father was Gil-han.
최영신이 친아버지야.
Jung-go, who had returned home, felt that someone had entered his house before him. He then looked at the table and saw food and drinks that had just been prepared. He is convinced the teacher is still around his house. Jung-go then shouted, calling out for teacher Jaebum, hoping to meet him because he still had many questions to ask. Meanwhile, Munho already arrived at the apartment found a message left by Youngsin. Munho called Detective Yan to hand over the recording taken from Mr. Hwang's safe. Detective Yan, who initially refused, suddenly changed his mind after learning that the video recording had been obtained by Healer.
나는 밤 심부름꾼에게 의뢰해서 구했습니다.
Munho knows Detective Yan wants to catch the Healer for years. Munho wants Detective Yan to share the results of the investigation and monitoring Youngsin from Mr. Hwang's target. Detective Yan's investigation reaches Mr. Hwang. When he played the recording on the man's phone, he tried to show surprise and indifference. The detective asked the director to be interrogated at the police station regarding the scandalous video involving officials. Youngsin quickly left for work and met Munho in the office lobby. He apologized for leaving the house without waiting for him to come home. Munho gave Youngsin a new phone using office funds because Youngsin's old phone was lost during the incident the other day.
회사 비품이니까 아껴 쓰고.
The new Jung-go was invited by Youngsin to the conference venue. Upon arrival, Sam Gaitai team was allowed to enter room due to invitation restrictions. Bonsu, who arrived first, contacted Munho to report the situation. Munho suggested the idea of getting into the conference room by going in disguise. He ordered Youngsin and Jung-go to go to the boutique and salon to change their appearance to look like socialites.
필요에 따라 무엇으로도 순식간에 변장할 수 있어야 된다는 거예요.
In the building where the conference event is taking place, Bong-soo disguises himself as a waiter while Jung-go and Young-sun arrive with a striking appearance as a perfect couple. The two claim to be guests attending an engagement party taking place in the room next door. At first, the staff doubted Jung-go's words because neither of them had an invitation. Jung-go pretended to call the building owner until the staff finally allowed them to enter, thinking they were VIP guests. Along with Bong-soo, the three of them quickly entered the restroom to prepare the camera and change clothes like the other reporters. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Jung-go contacts them from the Semdenius broadcast desk. He reminds Young-sun that all he needs to do is ask questions related to Jung-gi because Jung-go is ready to take over the broadcast. Young-sun and his two colleagues entered the room just as Kim Wicken began giving reporters the opportunity to ask questions. Young-sun courageously stepped forward and walked to the center. He bombarded Wicken's politics with questions, and Young-sun exposed all of Mr. Hwam's illicit activities, including providing escort women for Wicken. That was done to facilitate the building permit process.
설의 황제국 사장이 그 여자를 소개시켜줬다면서요.
While Young-sun was carrying out his plan, Mun-ho called Min-jae to distract him. At that moment, Min-jae was monitoring the ABS News broadcast outside the building. Afterward, Min-jae realized that he had missed something and immediately ran into the car with a very panicked look on his face. Mun-ho then explained about the video recording at a nightclub that was obtained from an informant. The broadcast was followed by an exclusive interview between Young-sun and Young-sun. At the end of the event, Mun-ho stated that it was impossible for him to broadcast fabricated news. Meanwhile, at the elder's house, Mun-sik accompanied him to watch politician Kim Wicken take the podium and begin his speech. The elder appeared calm, although in reality he was furious when he saw what happened at the press conference. Mun-sik certainly promised to resolve the issues caused by Mun-ho.
비상망을 가동시켜서 신문이나 방송 보도 등을 자제시켜야 할 것 같습니다.
After the broadcast ended, Jung-go and Young-sun began loading the equipment into the car. He also noticed several plainclothes police officers watching them. The police followed Jung-go's car heading home. Jung-go then just took the opportunity to overtake a large truck in front of him. Jung-go then told his friend to turn the car at an intersection, causing the police to lose track of them.
뭐야? 어디 갔어?
To make sure the police were really gone, Jung-go pulled over and dragged Young-sun out of the car. He instructed the youngest to continue the journey alone. Jung-go then invited Young-sun to go somewhere and celebrate their success. Young-sun clenched her fist as she was about to enter the elevator. And slowly, Jung-go approached the girl. He leaned in and tried to kiss her forehead. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Jung-go has prepared a cozy and warm place. That night, he wanted to express his feelings to Young-sun. Even though Young-sun herself said that there was still no room in her heart for Jung-go.
이렇게 옆에 있는 난 안 되나?
When Jung-go arrived home, teacher Jibum was already waiting for him with a slight smile on his face. Jung-go looked at him in disbelief, just like when they first met. He remembered the past, when Jaebum was the only one who took care of him after his grandmother passed away. Jaebum indeed uses a very strict method in educating Jung-go, because so that he can live for years in the destruction of his family. Both of them chose to stay in the empty building that Jung-go occupies with a few improvements to make the building look comfortable to live in. In short, Jaebum successfully trained Jung-go to become skilled in the car business. A few years later, Jaebum had to leave Jung-go and gave him Mrs. Minjuk's phone number as a way for him to earn a living. Back to the present, seeing his teacher appear before him, Jung-go felt disappointed because Jaebum had left him just like that in the past. Jaebum then took out a photo that he believed would make Jung-go's curiosity peak even more. Jaebum didn't expect that Jung-go already knew the cause of his father's death, which turned out to be suicide.
왜 자살했어?
Actually, Jung-go had known that fact for years, but he didn't dare to ask his mother directly because he was worried it would make her sad. However, what really devastated Jung-go was when Jaebum said that Young-suk committed suicide out of guilt after killing someone to get money. For years, Jae-bum searched for the truth about what really happened, but in the end, he gave up. Jae-bum asks Jung-go to find out the truth about his father's death, sure that Young-suk couldn't have done something so awful.
누굴 죽일 놈이 아니야.
The only person asked for clues is the man who took the photo of the five of them is Munho, still a child at that time. That same night, Jung-go carefully searched Munho's apartment and found a suitcase hidden in his safe. Inside the suitcase, there were many cassette tapes and a bouquet labeled Healer, dated May 1981. Meanwhile, at the police station, Detective Yeon instructed his subordinates to check the background of all Samdenius employees. They almost discovered the true identity of young Master. The detective's attention was diverted after hearing Mr. Hwang's death by suicide. It was revealed that Mr. Hwang left a note confessing to all his crimes, including the murder of Sumchul. Detective Yeon feels this case is strange, as everything is so well organized with evidence that was deliberately collected.
그리고 사람도 죽였답니다.
On the fourth floor, Munho, working overtime, was preparing to leave when he dropped a bag containing Jung-go's change of clothes. How shocked Munho was indeed when he found Yongsun's lost phone in Jung-go's clothing pocket. He then began to wonder if Jung-go was the healer who saved his nephew from the broken elevator incident the other day. That night, Munho received a call from Jung-go as a healer. With a slightly disguised voice, Jung-go asked about the photo of his father and his 4 friends, which Munho also had.
그 안에 있는 5사람 아시죠?
Munho is ready to explain the details about the events in 1992 along with their photos, as long as the healer shows their true face. At that time, Jung-go couldn't deny it because Munho also found evidence that the healer was Mr. Bongsu, who had been working as Yongsun's assistant. From that conversation, Munho finally realized that Jung-go was the son of Young-suk because he was so enthusiastic when asking about Jung-suk's past, especially since the two looked very similar.
나보다 더 잘 기억하고 있었을 거야.
Munho remembered the events as a child. He cared for Jung-go and Chi and when their parents held meetings. Because Jung-go keeps asking who actually killed his father. Munho finally said if Young-suk is suspected of killing his own friend, who is none other than Gil-han.
오기란.
However, Young-suk was only considered a suspect as the case was still unsolved. Young-suk died before he had a chance to clear his name. After visiting Munho's house, Jung-go told Mrs. Mingju that Munho invited him to help clear his father's name. However, with one condition, Jung-go must continue working at Samdenius under his identity as Mr. Bongso. Madame Mingju actually disagrees, because from the beginning she didn't really like Munho, as it seems that man is hiding many lies. Jung-go's decision to reveal his true face is also considered a form of recklessness. Jung-go promised himself that he would stop being a healer once he cleared his father's name.
딴 놈 뽑아야겠다. 으이크, 귀찮아라.
He will also reveal his secret all this time to Youngsun. Even though Youngsun will be disappointed because all this time he has been lying. The next day, Youngsun heard about Mr. Hwang's death. Chaos apparently also occurred in Samdenius, because since last night their site has been inaccessible. Munho then assigned tasks to cover the news. Youngsun was disappointed as Jung-go seemed to be keeping his distance and getting closer to Munho.
나와 같이 움직일 거야.
예, 알겠습니다.
It turns out Munho took Jung-go to a place, namely a car junkyard, which used to be the headquarters where Myung-gi and his friends gathered in the past when they were doing illegal radio broadcasts. Munho still fondly and vividly remembers when they gathered and joked with each other. However, in 1991, a tragedy occurred where Jilin died in a car accident. Unexpectedly, Jong-sik was indeed accused of causing his death. Munho didn't get much information from the incident, especially after the disappearance of Gilhan's autopsy results. He could only provide a file that might help Jung-go uncover what really happened.
이건 내가 그동안 취재한 것들이야. 다 넘겨줄게.
Munho also apologized because he previously told Detective Yeon to keep an eye on the people near Yongsan. it is likely that Bongsol's identity will also be investigated. Meanwhile, at the police station, Detective CA discovered that the type of drug used by Mr. Huang to commit suicide was the same as the drug that caused Sungkol's death.
그 약물이 고성철을 죽인 바로 그거다.
The Sungkol case was finally closed because the perpetrator who killed him was already dead. However, for Detective Yan, this work is a healer trying to fool him. After the death of Mr. Huang, Yan Hai now lives in a city to find a safer place. Detective Yan is worried Mr. Wichan's next reply. That morning, Detective went to Mr. Chizu's cafe to question Yongsun about the healer as Detective convinced Sungkol and Mr. Huang died at his hands.
최영신 기자 옆에 힐러가 있을 거라고.
At that time, Yongsun said that a healer would not take a job to eliminate someone. Moving to Mrs. Minju's headquarters, she tells Jung-go that Yongsun recently sent an email to the healer inviting him on a date. Mrs. Minju gently reminds Jung-go to keep the secret in front of Yongsun to protect him. He then set up Yongsun and Jung-go on a date at a movie theater, although Jung-go really wanted to show his face to Yongsun. Seeing Munsik in his office, of course, calmed Juno's emotions because, without any guilt, Munsik met Yongsun, also known as Chien. Munsik argued that he only wanted to take Yongsun to a safe place to protect her, because the elder considers Yongsun as an obstacle to becoming a mayoral candidate. No matter what, Munho himself will never hand over Yongsun to Munsik. Then, Munsik said he had already found Jung-go's whereabouts.
걔들 데리고 22년 전에 일이라도 파헤치겠다는 거야?
Upon arriving home, Munsik instructed Secretary Oh to welcome Jung-go at Chi an office. Inside Munsik's car, Jung-go managed to place a tracking device so he could monitor the man's movements. With his cold demeanor, Jung-go said that he had just returned from Russia and intended to find out the truth about his father's death. Hattie Mayong felt torn, seeing his friend's son who has now grown into a handsome young man. In front of Jung-go, he expressed his sadness as Jung-go's childhood friend, Chien, had already passed away. When Jung-go asked about Chien, Mayong instead experienced a seizure that made Munsik have to give meds. After connecting several events and his duties as a healer, only then did Jung-go finally realize that Yongsun was Chien. Previously, Munho wanted to check his DNA, and Munho accidentally called Yongsun by her real name. Jung-go now has to take better care of Yongsun as Secretary was the mastermind behind the elevator accident that the girl experienced.
사고가 나던 날 그 시간에 그 건물 근처에 있었네.
That very night, Jung-go went to Munho's apartment. He was very emotional, recalling the many lies Munho told, and even how Munho cruelly hid Yongsun from her own biological mother. Munho reasoned that he was forced to do so to keep Mayong-hee alive. He also promised that he would reveal everything at the right time. After finding out Yongsun is his childhood friend, Jung-go meets Yongsun at the cafe and hugs her tightly. Whether it was due to the guilt over their parents' actions or because both had similar fates, namely being victims of their parents' divorce.
야,
At that time, Jung-go begged Yongsun to allow him to stay overnight at the cafe because his apartment had a few issues. Yongsun then allowed him to stay overnight after calling Mr. Chizu. He also lent a change of clothes for Jung-go to wear. Accidentally, their hands gently came into contact when slightly picking up the fallen clothes. Yosin felt that Jung-go's hand was as warm as the healer's hand. That night, Jung-go ate the food prepared by Yongsun. Eventually, Jung-go discovered the reason why Mrs. Minkyu and teacher Joybum were trying to separate him from Yongsun, which is none other than to protect events of the past.
그래 자꾸 우리 떼내려고 했던 거지?
However, Jung-go intends to investigate his father's case, starting by looking for Mayong-hee's medical records. He felt confident in his feelings for Yongsun, unable to distance himself. Meanwhile, Jung-go rushed to see Mayong-hee, who was still lying weak after the doctor's examination. Munsik said that Mayong experienced a drop after Jung-go's arrival, who discussed Chien. It seems that Munho is fed up with Munsik's actions, making Mayong's situation worse.
그래서 이것도 괜찮다고 생각해.
The next day at Sunday News, they were watching a television broadcast reporting that Mr. Kim was being investigated at the prosecutor's office for indecent behavior. Munho gave a hint that Munsik is being considered for the replacement mayor, so they have to start the investigation from the source of Munsik's wealth.
김문식의 그동안 숨겨졌던 업적이라든가
Sunday also has to show the public whether Munsik is truly worthy of becoming the leader of Seoul. That made Jang's head feel challenged because Munho remained neutral, even if proven to have committed many frauds. That afternoon, Munsik intended to trap Jung-go to reveal whether he was a healer. The secretary sent an email to the healer and asked him to locate the whereabouts of a woman, Jung-go's biological mother. At the same time, Mrs. Jung-go received a fake message from her son inviting her to lunch at a cafe. Knowing his mother was in danger, Jung-go quickly went to get her. Jung-go, who was with Young-sun at the time, immediately entered the cafe where his mother was supposed to be. But he was already too late. His mother had disappeared. Unfortunately, when Jung-go asked Mrs. Minkyu for help to monitor the TV side, the computer system experienced a human error and had to shut down the machine for a few minutes. Jung-go was very surprised as the bodyguard agents who came to the place were more than he imagined. The subordinate managed to shoot a tranquilizer at Jung-go's leg, making him lose focus during the fight. Jung-go suffered a fairly serious injury to his arm. A little while later, while in a hidden place, the anesthetic that entered Jung-go's body really spread, so not long after, Jung-go fainted. Mrs. Minkyu was panicked because Jung-go suddenly went missing without any news as the signal weakened. After Mrs. Minkyu indeed gave clues about where Jung-go might be, Young-sun searched everywhere. Young-sun also found Jung-go on the rooftop in an injured state and immediately took him to the hospital. Meanwhile, teacher Jae-bum disguised as a healer to deceive Sang-se's henchmen. They then took Jae-bum to their headquarters. Young-sun himself was curious about how Jung-go could get hurt. He then checked his car and was very surprised to find out that Jung-go was a healer because all the evidence pointed to him. However, Young-sun was not yet ready to confirm it, fearing Jung-go would distance himself from his life. Besides Young-sun, there is also Do-young at the hospital who brings Jung-go warm clothes. Do-young is responsible for taking her home. At home, Young-sun cried because she felt deceived by the person she liked. Mr. Chi-sun suspected that the man Young-sun was referring to was Jung-go, as he was always suspicious. Munsik eventually met the man who claimed to be the healer at the SS Guard headquarters. He was surprised to find out it was actually an old friend of his. Munsik was a bit annoyed because Jae-bum warned him not to hurt the child of his two friends, who were none other than Jung-go and Chi-in, because he will protect both of them from the cruelty of Munsik.
네가 죽인 사람 더 있지?
It slightly reminded Munsik of his actions in the past, which also deceived Myung-hee after her husband and daughter passed away. Jae-bum's suspicion is at Munsik's quick success. However, at that time, Munsik considered Jae-bum as filth that needed to be removed to not disturb the peace of his life. Later, the detective brought police to free Jae-bum after he received a report from a woman who was none other than Mrs. Minja. Jae-bum was eventually brought in for further questioning at the police station. Myung started to be hesitant to take the medicine, which always made him sleep soundly. He was a bit suspicious about the very high medical and surgery costs that were previously covered by Munsik. At that time, Munsik didn't have a stable job yet. Munsik began to think about getting rid of someone from his past who could expose his actions, none other than Jae-bum. On the other hand, Sunday News interviewed Munho to ask for his opinion on Munsik's candidacy for mayor. As a close relative of Munsik, Munho said that if the jail news company was actually going bankrupt, Munsik was able to recover after he collaborated with investors. Back at the police station, Jae-bum confessed that he was indeed the healer who often took on shady jobs. However, he never once accepted a job to take someone's life. The truth was revealed when Jaebum consumed breakfast that had been laced with poison, as it was seen that one of the detectives received orders from Secretary O. Within minutes, Jaebum was dead. Jung-go couldn't hold back tears at his teacher's death. Jung-go tried taking Jaebum's body, but Daeong and several men stopped him as they were worried Detective Yeon would become suspicious. Mrs. Minju was very devastated upon hearing the sad news. He contacted Munho, told him Jaebum's body was at the hospital for autopsy. In the morgue, Juno saw his teacher's face for the last time.
아니지?
A short while later, Munho, who claimed to be a close relative of Jaebum, arrived with a detective. In front of Jaebum's lifeless body, Munho promised to continue Jaebum's fight to seek the truth about the death of his two friends. Munho blocked Juno, who at that time was about to take revenge on Munsik. Jaebum truly meant a lot in Juno's life, as he was considered like a father to him. Munho will not let Juno dirty his hands by taking out Munsik, because he will find another way to get revenge. Munsik is indeed currently being interviewed by the media team about his family life and his preparations for candidacy. Actually, all this time, Myeong-hee never once felt happy living with Munsik. Her heart felt empty, but she had to hide it in front of others. To steal police data about Jaebum's confession as a healer, Mrs. Minju used her top hacking skills and used for long. The computer system chaos at the police station made Detective Yeon convinced that the hacker was Mrs. Minju, his former senior who had once resigned. It turns out that she was once disappointed with the leadership's decision. Back then, the leadership never appreciated Mrs. Minju's sacrifices in her work as a detective. At the end of the video, it turned out that Jaebum left a message for Juno, hoping he could live happily with the girl he loves. He hoped Juno could let go of his plan for revenge. Actually, Juno absolutely felt hopeless. He disconnected his devices with Mrs. Minju and turned off his phone for a week. Not only Mrs. Minju and Daeon friends in Samdenius also asked people around their neighborhood. However, they couldn't find any trace of him because Juno used a fake address. For years, he followed all of Munsik's orders. However, this time, Myeong-hee has to find out what her husband is doing in the study. Myeong-hee received a call from Young-sun, who was looking for her. Without Myeong-hee realizing it, she was speaking with her own biological daughter.
최명희 사모님과 통화할 수 있을까요?
Worried about Juno's state, Mrs. Minju goes to Young-sun's cafe to give him a clue. Seeing Young-sun's immense love for Juno, she finally agreed to provide the location of a building believed to be Juno's residence all this time. Long story short, Young-sun arrived at the abandoned building in question. She took an old elevator and found an unused clinic room. With the skills he carefully learned from his ex-convict friends, Young-sun successfully managed to open a room where Juno was believed to be. Young-sun was shocked to see Juno weak from dehydration and refusing to eat. Seeing Young-sun in front of him was like a dream for Juno. Young-sun's presence brought a new spirit to the man to continue living, because there was still a girl he had to protect. That night, Young-sun stayed over at Juno's place, cooked for him, and took care of him until Juno's condition gradually improved. Juno reactivated communication system with Minju. He started the day by meeting Munho and discussing the next plan, as Juno had already passed his mourning period. Juno said that Young-sun had actually started to suspect his identity as a healer. However, the girl never once asked about the reason Jung-go lied about the wound on his arm. What Jung-go wants to do right now is to take revenge for Jaebum's death and clear his father's name.
난 내 사부의 복수를 원합니다.
그래.
Munho then provided a little information about Munsik, who turned out to be supported by a chairman and a secretary named Oh. Where Secretary Oh always does Munsik's dirty work to keep his image intact. That afternoon, without guilt, Munsik went to Jaebum's cremation. He intends to take the ashes of the deceased, and of course, Juno will not allow that. Juno had already taken the ashes at the same time. As a final tribute, Juno wanted to scatter the ashes in a place that had been his teacher's dream.
뼈가루뿐이긴 하지만
After mustering up a lot of courage, Juno finally told Yongsin about his true identity. Both of them went to the police station as Yongsin had to attend a detective's summons to interrogate him regarding the healer. Thanks to Yongsin's help, Juno was able to open the code that made it easier for Mrs. Minju to hack it. Because at precisely that time, the police computers will perform a reset. Meanwhile, Munsik finally realized that Juno couldn't be underestimated because he could manipulate his arrival data from Russia. Juno has been working at Samdinius Weeks. Secretary O found Myung-hee recordings, who always receives calls from Yongsin. It seems that this time, Yongsin is a threat to Munsik, so he must get rid of him at once. A detective working with Secretary O almost literally poisoned Yongsin with a bottle of drink. Same time, Juno found evidence of the detective's crime, who often received a sum of money from Secretary O through different accounts. Realizing someone was threatening him, the detective went home to check his secret belongings. Easily, Juno was able to incapacitate the detective when he intended to pack his belongings to flee abroad. Munho eventually provided this information to Detective Yon, indicating that one of his subordinates had betrayed him. Without wasting much time, he and several team members immediately headed to Detective Pak's apartment and found his men tied up. The embarrassing incident was immediately covered by Samdinius because Munho had previously reported the case.
과정을 취재하게 해주세요. 그거면 됩니다.
The reputation of the police was tarnished because a detainee died at the police station, and he was even killed by Detective Yon's subordinates. In a state of panic, the detective contacted Secretary O, and it turns out that this was recorded by Juno. The Secretary O was taken to the police station questioning. Not long after Detective Pak was detained, Munsik thought Munho might have a conflict with him. Then, Myung-hee watched Samdinius's report, saying it was his friend who caused Jaebum's death in an unnatural way. Myung-hee became increasingly doubtful about her husband.
명희야.
부탁이야.
One day, Yongsin received a call from Myung-hee asking if he would be interviewed. With great enthusiasm, he left for work, and Munsik was already waiting for him outside. He intended to pick up Yongsin, and at that moment, Yongsin didn't suspect a thing. She agreed to go with Munsik. He knew Munsik was Myung-hee's husband. Then, Munsik did not immediately take Yongsin to her house, but instead to the jail news office. He wants to tell about the crimes committed by the healer, which are none other than the actions inherited from Junshuk, who killed his own friend named Gilhan. Learning Yongsin was taken to the jail news office, Munho picked him up, worried Munsik might say something out of line. Munsik argued that he only wanted to provide a comfortable life and a brilliant career as a reporter. He also intends to help clear Juno's name as a healer, for which Munsik has provided a lawyer. Munsik's words were dismissed as nonsense by Munho because he would surely get rid of Juno and jail.
얘들아 무슨 친구잖아.
Seeing Munho's arrival following him to jail news made Yongsin wonder why someone with a high position was so worried about him, who was just an ordinary staff member. Yongsin began to suspect, could Munho be related to her by blood? In the end, Munho honestly said that Yongsin's biological mother is Myung-hee. At his office, Munho explained the illness Myung-hee suffers from, where she often has seizures whenever the topic of her daughter comes up. The reason Myung-hee never searched for her daughter all this time is because she believed her daughter had already passed away. Munho also provided a childhood photo of Yongsin with Myung-hee, as well as a family card, in case Yongsin's real name is indeed Chian.
네 엄마 살리기 위해서였던 거.
Upon arriving home, Yongsin was surprised to learn his father's name was the same as the victim killed by Jungko's father. At that moment, Jungko went to see Yongsin to explain the misunderstanding occurred. He promised to find evidence that his father was innocent. Jung-go began visiting former investigators who had handled his father's case. There were 2 police officers fired during Jung-suk's case. However, just as he found the former investigator in question, Mun-sik's men ended up killing him. The fight between Jung-go and King Mun-sik was discovered by Mrs. Minju. He finally told Mun-ho and Young-sin that Jung-go was in danger because he had found the key witness for investigator Young-suk.
빨리 도망가, 정우야.
Seeing the man dead, Jung-go immediately left the scene and went home, Jung-go cleaning stain on his shirt. Jung-go felt hopeless because there were no more witnesses who could help him clear his father's name. To Mrs. Minju, Jung-go indeed said that before the man died, he managed to mention a number, 391. It is possible that this number is related to the confession recording of Young-suk during his interrogation. Mrs. Minju is still investigating the meaning of that number. Meanwhile, Mun-ho and Young-sin were questioned by the police about the incident. Mun-ho claimed he was just passing by, so he didn't know who the perpetrator was. Both of them then went home and met Mr. Chizu, with tears streaming down his face. Young-sin said that she had discovered her real name and her biological parents. Mun-ho expressed gratitude to Mr. Chizu, the ideal father for Young-sin. Back at the police station, Detective Young-sin feels disappointed because Secretary O was easily released, as he is backed by superiors. Moreover, there is no strong evidence of his crime. Meanwhile, Detective Pak chooses to remain silent. Detective Young then contacts Mun-ho to request information, as he is convinced that Mun-ho is hiding something. Not wanting to hold back his longing for his mother, on that day Young-sin decided to meet Myung-hee and at the same time conduct an interview. The meeting made Young-sin emotional. After 20 years, he was able to see his mother's face.
요새 힘든 일이 좀 많아가지고.
Myung himself recounted the consequences of his work with Gilan as a reporter who at that time was once hunted by a group of gangsters. That night, she was forced to leave her daughter at a dump site so that she could stay alive. Because of harboring sadness and trauma, Myung experienced seizures again, making Young-sin convinced that he must maintain his true identity for the sake of his mother's health. His presence was monitored by Secretary O, who promptly contacted the elder. The elder wants Young-sin to be removed at once because he could disrupt the concentration of the Mun-sik in the mayoral election. The conversation was overheard by Jung-go, who threatened Secretary O not to do anything reckless or his life would be at stake. He then took over the phone and directly asked where the leader was at that moment. It was then that Jung-go realized that the number 391 referred to his father's storage number. He then devised a strategy with Mun-ho to uncover the identity of the elder, who also wanted the recording.
진술 테이프가 거기 있다는 얘긴데.
뭐 일단 가서 뒤져봐야죠.
At Young-sin's place, he tricked the agent's elders while getting the recording at O's house. Jung-go pretended to lose and surrender in front of the agents again so he could be taken to the elder. It turns out that at the same time Mun-ho was preparing to do a live broadcast in Samdenius because the original recording had already been obtained by Daeon. He revealed facts about the recent death of a former investigator who turned out to be a key witness in the incident involving the deaths of 2 reporters back in 1992.
경찰 조사실에서 어느 살인 용의자의 진술을 듣게 되었습니다.
Apparently, at the time, both investigators were dismissed without a clear reason because they had uncovered irregularities in the case. Based on his observations, Mun-ho suspected that behind all of this was a man referred to as the elder. To uncover the identity of the man, Jung-go, who was at the elder's residence, managed to capture a clear image of his face using the camera in his glasses. Jung-go claimed that he was a reporter from the Samdenius Daily. After the guard inspected his glasses, Jung-go finally revealed his true identity. He was the son of one of the elder's crime victims from decades ago. The elder then invited him for a drink and lit some incense, which immediately caused Jung-go to lose consciousness. The scene then shifted to an event from 22 years ago, when Gilhan died after being caught covering a bribery case involving a construction company. During the interrogation, Jun-suk, who was a witness to the incident, was approached by several suspicious individuals who also seized the existing evidence. Meanwhile, Mun-sik, who was also at the crime scene at the time, gave a false statement claiming that Jun-suk was the one who killed Gilhan, saying the two had been fighting over money from corruption.
죽였습니다.
Back in the present, Young-sin, who was at the elder's house, was very worried about Jung-go's condition. Especially at that time, the two police officers she brought with her still didn't dare to conduct a raid. A little while later, Jung-go was finally found by Young-sin, and she immediately took him home. At home, Mun-sik was still pretending in front of Myung-gi. He insisted that he had nothing to do with the deaths of his friends, because from the beginning, it was Jun-suk who was at fault.
당신한테 말하지 않은 부분 없어.
Since that day was Young-sin's birthday, Jung-go gave her a necklace that could be used as a tracking and sensing device in case she was in danger. Jung-go finally introduced himself to Lord Chizu, saying that he was Young-sin's boyfriend. Even though at that time, Lord Chizu was upset because Young-soo often made his daughter cry. One night, Secretary O was seen going to Mun-ho's apartment. He intended to steal valuable items, specifically a bandage from an attack in the 1980s. Mun-sik planned to use the fox and that bandage to influence netizens. Back then, he was a true reporter, so Mun-sik would protect the media and broadcasting rights. He also intended to dedicate himself to Seoul for the sake of democratic freedom. Hearing that made Mun-ho and Jung-go sick, because Mun-sik acted like he was the most righteous man, free of sin.
프린트 잡지 보이세요?
Meanwhile, Mun-sik's subordinate named Lorden has now joined Agent Sang-so. Apparently, they plan to kidnap Mun-ho and take him to an undisclosed location. Unfortunately, by the time Jung-go realized what was happening, he had lost track of Mun-ho because the kidnappers tricked him by taking Mun-ho's phone in a different direction. Young-sin also found herself in danger when she was followed by Secretary O while at Mun-ho's apartment. As it turns out, Garen's subordinates used Mun-ho and Young-sin to threaten Jung-go. Jung-go was forced to confess that he was the one who eliminated the eyewitness at a church.
시간 재기 시작합니다. 이제 20초 지났습니다.
With that recorded confession as evidence, the boss now had a weapon to exploit Jung-go's weakness. He offered Jung-go a deal to cooperate. Not wanting the confession video to be widely spread, Jung-go had no choice but to follow the elder's orders. He apologized to Young-sin, saying that for the time being, he couldn't see her and had to turn off his phone.
남들처럼 사는 거 당분간은 좀 힘들 것 같아.
Mun-ho, who had previously been knocked unconscious, was actually taken by Mun-sik to a meeting room, along with the owner of a leading broadcasting company. Yes, it was then announced that starting today, Mun-ho would be appointed as the head of Jeol News.
축하연이 되는 건가요?
At that moment, Mun-ho didn't say much because Mun-sik said that the elder would take good care of Jung-go, as he was interested in bringing Jung-go into his business. However, Mun-ho wouldn't allow Jung-go to get trapped in the dark world that the elder was involved in. When he got home, Mun-ho asked what Mun-sik's next plan was regarding Jian. That conversation, it turns out, was overheard by Myung-hee. Mun-sik never expected that the next day, Myung-hee would say goodbye as she planned to stay briefly with Mun-ho. It turns out she wanted to find out the whereabouts of her daughter, who was still alive. Myung-hee expressed her gratitude as Mun-sik had taken good care of her for the past 20 years. Even though until now, Myung-hee still couldn't love or accept Mun-sik in her heart because of the many lies he had told.
어떻게 해도 당신의 여자는 될 수 없다고.
Moving on to Jung-go, who stands alone against the elders, intending to find out who killed Jaebum. He follows Mr. and to a place suspected to be the hideout of his adopted child. Jung-go took the fingerprints of the 4 men who were at the murder scene at the time to match them with the evidence at the police station. The first place Mun-ho and Myung-hee visited was the Sam Denius news office. Myung-hee agreed to be questioned about the illegal radio broadcast, as well as her experience working as a reporter in 1992, which might help uncover the case of her 2 friends' deaths. Jung-go's action of taking fingerprints from all of his subordinates made the elder furious. He immediately reported the matter to the senior elder, saying that Jung-go seemed difficult to control.
제 소견을 말씀드리자면 이 잔에 길들이기 어렵습니다.
However, the elder was trying to track down a forger who had been working with Jung-go all this time. Jung-go then handed over the fingerprints of the elder's subordinates to the detective for further investigation. The detective was very enthusiastic, as he was able to communicate with his former superior from cybercrime, who was providing significant help with his current investigation. In the next episode of Sam Denius's broadcast, Mun-ho revealed a construction company that had previously been investigated by Myung-hee and her friends. Long story short, the elder's team managed to locate Madame Minkyu's whereabouts. He brought a considerable number of his subordinates to carry out the arrest. Outside the building, Jung-go grew suspicious because many agents were leaving the scene in a hurry. After checking what was going on, Jung-go finally realized that Madame Minkyu was in danger. He told his friends to leave the house immediately and pack up their belongings. At just the right moment, Jung-go managed to get Madame Minkyu to a safe place. After 8 years of working together, Jung-go was finally able to see Mrs. Minju's real face, as the two had never met. Tanya searched Madame Minju's headquarters, and Mr. Chizu's cafe was not spared from the elder's henchmen. Fortunately, Jung-go had anticipated this and secured the situation. For the first time, Mr. Chizu saw Jung-go's prowess in taking down several officials at once. In the end, Jung-go was forced to admit his true identity. For time being, Jung-go asked Mr. Chizu to close his cafe because Yongsin is in danger. He promised to keep watch over the place 24 hours a day. Jung-go provided a copy of the video that the late Seungkol brought from abroad. It turns out the video contains a recording of elders with a Russian businessman to conduct illegal research. After Jung-go collected the fingerprints of An's subordinates, it will be in vain, as the evidence at the police station has already been cleaned, difficult for them to match the fingerprints.
지문 채취는 벌써 했을 거 아니야.
With a simple device, Mrs. Minju receives information that the video confession of Jung-go will soon be distributed. That made Yongsin sad, but she wouldn't leave Jung-go.
그 미친 늙은이부터 잡자. 그럼 돼.
Yongsin invited Jung-go to flee abroad, but Jung-go didn't want to run away like a coward, taking his girlfriend as a fugitive. It turns out Jung-go had prepared an alternative plan to put the elder in prison. That night, Mun-ho invited Myung-hee to Chizu's cafe. From a photo displayed there, Myung-hee finally realized that Yongsin was his biological daughter. Mr. Chizu warmly welcomed Myung-hee as Yongsin's birth mother. He also paid careful attention to Yongsin's photos over the years, up until now when he is 28 years old. A sad fate was experienced by Mun-sik after Myung-hee left. He suffered from seizures and often spent nights drinking while talking to himself.
네가 사랑을 하면 얼마나 했어?
Jung-go believes that Mun-sik can be treated later. For now, he will focus on the elder. An informant from China was reported to be coming to Korea to deliver a sample of the research evidence that the elder had been after all this time. The informant only wanted to hand over the evidence to reporter Mun-ho so that he could cover it in the mass media. Mun-ho took the opportunity to do a live broadcast, even though he had to face Mr. and subordinates. After the informant was interviewed by Yongsin, Jung-go planned a scenario in case he was shot dead in an incident involving the struggle for evidence of the elder's crime. Mrs. Minju cleared Jung-go's name as a fugitive in the murder case by replacing Jung-go's facial sketch at the police station. Not long after, ABS News broadcasted a report stating that the fugitive who killed Seungkol had died. The elder was arrested for allegedly giving the order to kill the informant, along with other crimes. After everything ended happily, Mun-ho repaired his relationship with Munja. Jung-go and Yongsin then began a more serious relationship. Both of them continue to work as reporters who uphold the values of truth, honesty, and integrity.